just check who else is on from my team.
I'm on, Martin. Chris is on. Ruth's on. I think Richard's on as well.
You're live, Colin.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry for this delay. My understanding is it was tested earlier in the week, but it does seem to have been a problem this morning. So unfortunately, we can't see either Martin, Chris, Richard, or Ruth, but they're on their phones. And I'm afraid you'll probably just have to butt in if you want to speak, or because I can't see or not. So, but if we start off, and the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence, Andrea.
It really helps if you unmute yourself, doesn't it? I haven't received any apologies.
Colin, could I just say it would seem that Chris Bryan from Stroud District is having a problem. I can't see that he's been trying to get in there, but if he can't get in, I'll give his apologies and I'll take some notes for Stroud.
Okay, Andrea, could you give?
Okay, thank you.
Please.
I'm finding it quite difficult. People are breaking up. I don't know if anyone else has that problem.
Lots. Everybody's doing it. I mean, they're doing it. I mean, this system.
I think it's okay.
Okay, I'll crack on.
Turn the video off and just leave the sound on. If that will help your connection.
Yeah. Okay. Minutes of the last meeting. People will have had a chance to read them. Anybody got any issues with those? If you can just shout. That seems pretty quiet, so I'm going to accept that I can sign the minutes as true and fair record. And declarations of interest, please let us know. I think the easiest way, if you've got a declaration to make, just put it in on the chat. One thing is those that can, if you can raise your hands when you want to speak, that would be useful for me. But the next item 4 is the Police and Crime Commissioner and his update. Okay. Martin, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I hope you can hear me. First of all, can I point out that none of my team can get onto WebEx. So it's not, it's obviously a collective problem because we're all in different locations with quite good IT. So I apologise for that, but I hope it's going to be okay. Before I start, can I just check people can hear me? I don't all say yes, but just perhaps say if you can't, if that's possible.
Yes.
Good, Martin. Yeah, it's good.
Yes.
Good. Okay. Well, I'll probably take it fairly brief in chunks, bearing in mind we can't see each other. First of all, it's not long since the last meeting, so the update is relatively short, and I'll keep it short so we can take more questions at the end on areas where members would like to go to. Some of the most significant things right now, operationally and from a PCC's point of view, is the work around the Bamford Motor Patrol Centre. Many will be familiar with it. It's one of the most important sites in the constabulary on the intersection of the A40 and the M5. Virtually all police assets, just save on a few, have now been moved off that site, primarily due to the roadworks that are taking place on the A40, on the bypass there. The reason for that, discussed at length with the Chief Constable over several months, was that if we continued responding from there during the roadworks, response time, particularly to Gloucester, would fall to a level which operationally the Chief felt was unacceptable and dangerous. So the majority of response teams, traffic teams, dog teams, have all been moved off that site. In many ways, that was helpful during COVID-19, so it happened very quickly. It split up a lot of crucial teams. So if you're wondering why you've got officers deploying from different locations than previously, that's what it is. So that is the good news. The other good news is that the planning consent to rebuild and refresh that patrol centre is now in with Tewkesbury Borough Council. I think I said that at the last meeting. It's progressing well, and we have the final business case coming to me and the Chief Constable, I think, in the latter part of next week. And I anticipate it will be approved. I don't want to preempt what's in the paper, but we have worked on the finances very substantially, reducing the cost directly due to interventions by the OPC, myself, my Chief Executive, particularly reducing the original cost down from projected 23 million, then down to an 18.9 million build, and probably due to the uncertainties around Brexit and our finances going forward, we've now reduced that down to £12 million and actually retained pretty much all the features we want of it and improve in other areas. So happy to take questions on that, but there'll be more, I think, at the next Street and Crime Panel meeting when we know the outcome of the planning consent and the final business case. If all things go well, we hope to be on site demolishing it, not me personally, around about January 2021. It's certainly an affordable build and it's well overdue. So I'm pleased about that. I will just stop there to make sure people can hear me, because I don't want to be talking to myself, Colin, Chair. So was that okay for audio so far?
That was fine. I think everyone heard you. Does anyone have any questions on Van Furlong or any comment? I can't see hands going up. Oh.
Right, I'll continue then. So I thought I'd do it this way because, you know, with the IT being how it is, I just don't want to be talking for half an hour. I realise I'm on my own. On a financial situation, obviously the OPCC and myself keep a very close eye on the financial position, particularly at the moment, with regards to the uncertainties around COVID-19. And we hold very regular meetings with the Chief Financial Officer and his team to make sure that's going okay. With regards to costs of COVID-19 so far, we are supposed to be tracked. It's been about 1.3 million additional costs to police the pandemic so far. The majority of that, the first £1 million, you'll be aware, came from our reserves, which we can't replace at this stage and don't anticipate being able to replace them, but that's what they were there for. And we have had some money back from government to cover the cost of medical grade PPE and a few other areas, which we can cover later on. So that's good. There is a risk, of course, at the moment with the SPR being put back. We were preparing for, we thought, a 3-year spending settlement. Now we know it's just be a 1-year settlement, and we don't know what will be in that. We're not complaining because we understand the situation the government is in, and certainty is one thing that is not certain, what is certain at the moment. So that is an issue for us. We don't know when we will get the budget for next year, probably late December, maybe even as late as January. So we will cope with that. It's not unique to Gloucestershire. We don't need to panic at this stage. We won't panic at any stage. You will be aware that the police were awarded a 2.5% pay rise, and police staff also a 2.5% pay rise. That is good news. So obviously we are hoping that any uplift in funding will cover those costs. Otherwise it will potentially fall either to the local taxpayer, which I think would be unacceptable, to pay for all of that, and also, or we have to make people redundant and make savings elsewhere. We hope not. We're fairly optimistic on that. So I think that really covers the finance. I think it's steady as you go, Chair, and we can't say much more than that, apart from to say we are totally committed to the uplift of officers. That is very important. My understanding, number 10 is very committed to the uplift of officers, and I can report that within the current financial envelope, we are not only on schedule for the ones that the government are paying for, we are ahead of schedule on recruitment and police numbers. I think around about 11,050 right now, hopefully get into about projected to go to nearly 1,200 by the end of this financial year, which is well ahead of where we expected to be. It's a great credit to the Chief Constable and I think my team to make money available for that, but it will be tricky to maintain that if the budgets don't increase next year, which they won't. That's the financial side. Anything on the financial area that I'd like me to talk about?
Right. Nope. Anyone that wants to ask any questions on the finances that Martin's just gone through?
Good, thank you. And just to reassure the panel, it's one of the major functions of the OPCC and myself. We really do scrutinise pretty much every element of the budget. At least once a month we go through it, so we do know what's happening there. And I think we're in a good place compared to some other constabularies. Members will undoubtedly be aware there's been a review of the PCC. It was announced by ministerial statement some time ago. It falls into two parts. The first part will take place before the PCC election is now scheduled for May, and the second part will obviously take place shortly afterwards. My understanding is that review has now reported to the Home Secretary. You will be aware that it includes the review of the panel, their functions and their powers, and you probably have a better line into what the recommendations are around that than I do. But it certainly is looking at increasing some of the responsibilities of PCCs into the community safety criminal justice world to a degree, or offender management world. But I think that will come after the next election. I don't think there's going to be any major changes around my role before the next election. But also be aware it does also include recommendations around fire governance. They're yet to be reported, and I'll wait to see what's in those. So the review, I think my anticipation, will be reported to us all simultaneously by ministerial statement during November. Anything on that?
Okay. Actually, David, you wanted to come in on the finances, and I got missed.
Just wanted to check I understood the numbers. Martin, could you repeat the numbers in terms of what the head count is at the moment and where you anticipate? You mentioned a number, I think, of 1,200. When do we hit that number?
Right, David, if I can, during the meeting, I'll get the exact figures for you, because I can drill into my computer. My understanding is we are now around about 1,150 officers, and the anticipating by the end of March we will be closer to 1,200, maybe a few less. But I can, if I get a moment while someone else is speaking, I can actually get those up on my screen here and put them in the chat message for you. But it's closer to 1,200.
Yeah, and just on that, and on previous meetings,
yeah, one
of the issues that's been highlighted is the long lead time in terms of new officers training.
Yes.
Given all of that's going on, are the new officers as they come, is that having an impact, or do we still anticipate that officers will be brought online, if you like, reasonably quickly?
Yeah, it's a very helpful question. The new officers we anticipate will be brought online on schedule, slightly ahead of schedule. We're very fortunate having the Sabrina Centre, and Mr. Norman was there, so I think he will confirm it's a tremendous facility which allows us to train in a COVID-friendly way, because the amount of space there and the open nature of the environment around it. So we don't anticipate any delays to the officers, the new officers coming through. Also, a kind of a byproduct of COVID, what very few good byproducts of COVID, but one is that people are not retiring quite so quickly as we anticipated. So we have a few more who are staying with us, which is great news with regards to experience. But just to elaborate on the issue around new trainees, what we are seeing now, and we'll see ever increasingly, is a very young and a very inexperienced workforce. And I can get the exact figures, but it is going to be a challenge for us. And having officers on the books in training, it takes a very substantial period of time before you actually see them single crewed in a patrol car, because they are absolutely in training. That training lasts for 3 years. So it's a great story, but it's going to take a while to build up into operational effectiveness. Is that okay?
Okay, thank you, David. On that point, Martin, it might be, the committee may find it useful at some point to have kind of an experience profile of the force, so that we can see how experienced and how many fairly new recruits there are. I think that would just be quite informative.
I'll make sure you get that, Chair, if you put out an action for me. It's an issue we're dealing with nationally at National Police Chiefs Council level, the APCC. It affects all forces. Of course, we lost a lot of officers, and to replace them does take time. They are inexperienced, but they are still capable and will make a great contribution to policing in Gloucestershire, even during their training, but not quite to the same level. They will make mistakes from time to time. They'll need supervision. We'll get that back to you, Chair. Thank you. It's a good point.
Okay. Do you want to carry on, or are you moving on to the COVID-19 enforcement?
I'm happy to stop at any time, as you know. Just a couple of things. One of the priorities is around environmental impact of police and sustainability. We're making great progress on that on a national basis. I now lead for Police in England and Wales on that. Just to update members that we are working very much now with the Blue Light Commercial Company. That's the police commercial company which we created a couple of years ago, with the Active Building Centre, with the NPCC. And we're focused on three main areas. Social value. All commissioners and chief officers want to understand the social value that policing can add. One specialist area around estates, our buildings, to make sure they are sustainable, they are as carbon neutral as possible, and going as high tech as we can within budgets. And a second one is on the vehicle fleet across the UK. We're looking for good practice on that. So I'll be taking that forward several months and hopefully beyond. I want to move on swiftly. This is a very important one, I think. Is Rural Crime Week. I hope members of the panel saw the activity either on social media, in the press, or actually if they're in the countryside, actually saw it actually taking place. Rural Crime Week was a tremendous success in my view, absolutely fantastic. Great collaboration with National Police Street Council, the Rural Crime Network, but also with the NFU, the CLA, pretty much everybody, and we had a fantastic week, really demonstrating and also pushing the boundaries of what we can do in rural Gloucestershire. That was there because one of my priority areas is the Green and Pleasant County and the compassionate approach. You will see they targeted hair courses and they had success around that. They targeted rural criminals. They looked at poaching, illegal angling, pretty much every part of rural criminality, including the serious acquisitive crime, which blights certain parts of our county. So I was absolutely delighted on that. What you may have seen is the 4x4s, the drones, etc., really taking wildlife crime to a new level. But also what you won't have seen is the work of our serious organised crime teams, who took out the people who burgled Sudeley Castle, a very complicated inquiry. The offender there was sentenced, I think, to 4 years, and that took a lot of work. I think it shows the absolute commitment of the constabulary to policing the rural parts of our county, understanding the rural parts of our county as well as the towns and cities. Are there any comments on that?
William.
Okay, well, I will just add, where I think Gloucestershire is an exemplar when it comes to rural crime and rural matters, is because members may not be aware that Rural Crime Week was cancelled by the National Police Chiefs Council this year. The Chief Constable and I discussed that because it is a priority area for my policing crime plan, and we both felt we wanted to go it alone. So Gloucestershire was the only force in the country that had a Rural Crime Week this year. Others may have done a few bits and pieces. We were the only force in the country that had a Rural Crime Week, and I'm glad we did. And I'm very grateful for the Chief Constable have actually raised it with me to say, Martin, it's one of your priorities. We are going to do this. So if people ask ever, what difference does that particular element of the police and crime plan have? That's one very good example of it. Unfortunately, a few people thought we had just, been a week late or something and weren't particularly complimentary about the police. But let me assure you, we weren't late. We were the only force in the country that actually did it. Right.
Okay, I've got William and then Ray afterwards.
Great. I'm not hearing much.
Can you hear me?
Okay, go ahead, William.
I'd just like to say to the Commissioner that the PR that was involved with the Rural Week went down very, very well locally here, particularly with regard to dog theft.
Yeah.
And the work that was put in on that was most appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, William. I appreciate those comments. On dog thefts, it's something that I've spoken at length with the Commission about, and my lead on a compassionate approach to make sure we don't just do it one-off, we have a proper protocol in place. It is an absolutely vile crime, which is still prevalent at the moment, but we're having some good success on that. And long may that continue.
Absolutely.
Okay, Ray?
Yes, a question for you, Martin. When you were talking about sustainability, you mentioned carbon neutrality you were working towards.
Yes.
Do you have a target date for that?
We do, and it's an ambitious one, and it's not all in our own hands. The ambition at the moment is 2030, which is ambitious, as you will know. I think most people go for 2035, but we feel there is a possibility, and we should set ourselves that stretch target. Probably, I can't guarantee it 100% because a lot of it is out of our hands. But certainly, the way we are now reviewing our buildings to put in heat pumps rather than gas boilers, if we can do that. The way we designed this Sabrina Centre, which will become hopefully an active building, producing more energy than others. And you know, we basically, we're not there yet, but we believe that we can, all police forces could go to 20% electric on their vehicles now. We think we can go to 40% shortly. So it's an ambitious target. The bit is outside of our control, is outside of all of our control, is the amount of fossil fuels that are used to generate the electricity in the country. And we were given a presentation just, I think, day before yesterday on how we're doing on our targets. So in the areas that we control, we could get to that target. On the areas that others control, we're not so sure. I know you understand this, Ray, so I hope you understand what I'm talking about.
Yep, I do. Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, do you want to, I don't think there's anyone else indicated. Martin, do you want to carry on?
To wrap up fairly quickly, I don't want to take too much of people's time. Crime levels are always important to everybody. Of course, it's the Chief Constable who should hold his own performance improvement conferences, which he does. One of my team attended those performance meetings to really satisfy ourselves that they are managing their performance across a whole host of areas. And without going into any great detail, I can take questions if that's helpful. Is that Gloucestershire an area which is relatively we sit in the middle across all crime types in our most similar forces. If you took an average, we sit 4th out of 8 on pretty much all areas, some slightly higher, some slightly lower, and no great outliers. What we basically do is to look in control bands of where we are in comparison to other forces, nationally most similar, and we look for areas where we are an outlier, i.e. too high, too low, and as long as you're within the middle bands, you probably can be relatively confident things are about right. But the moment they go out of kilter is when the chief will intervene in a certain area, and so will I. The good news around that is now we turn to geographical policing. The superintendents on the 3 districts and the chief inspectors on the 6 districts will be accountable for their performance in those areas. So that's the good news. People will be aware that we've had a burglary issue last year and a little bit the year before, and I reported a reducing trend on crimes there. And that trend of reduction in burglary is continuing. We are overall down 25% on last year, which is great news. Hopefully that will stay there. It's a lot of work to do it. The constabulary were going to launch a major anti-burglary campaign just starting now. That has actually been changed because now we have the lockdown. Burglaries will go down regardless. So those resources will be put to a more useful place right now because burglary will go down, that's for sure. And it's also an outlier again. Vehicle offences are also a continual downward trend, which is great news. I will maintain that Gloucestershire, we are lucky we live in a low crime area in comparison to the majority of the country, and we must promote that and be grateful for it. It's why people want to come and live here, they want to enjoy the countryside, but we mustn't assume that everything is well, because it's not. Even a small county force like Gloucestershire, we still have murders, we still have rapes, we have domestic violence on a daily basis, we have burglaries on a daily basis, we have traffic collisions, we have missing people, we have county lines, modern day slavery. We look after the royal family. It is a very busy force, but please, it is overall a safe place to live. And my assessment is overall the constabulary are doing well at keeping us safe. So that's on crime levels. You know, I know members will have other areas they want to talk about. I'm very happy, as you know, Chair, to talk about pretty much everything. So before I move on and talk about COVID, I will pause and take any questions on any reasonable topic.
Okay, that's your open invitation. Anyone want to comment, ask questions, whatever? Can you indicate, please?
Gosh.
I can't see anyone indicating, so Martin, do you want to go on to COVID?
Yes, well, the COVID enforcement plan, this is a tricky area. The reason I asked this to go on the agenda was because obviously COVID enforcement and the 4 years have taken place since lockdown began. But just last month, the government awarded Gloucestershire Constabulary £229,000 to, one could say, beef up enforcement, but certainly to make an impact on enforcement to help us in that cause. I believe the County Council received a similar amount of money to provide COVID marshals and other work around encouraging people to comply with the regulations. When I had notification that that money was going to be received, and because the enforcement of COVID is a tricky area for all of us as to what the right balance is, I asked the Chief Constable to bring that to my governance board so I could scrutinise that. And it's an operational, we must remember that enforcement is an operational matter for the Chief Constable, but it's quite right that I scrutinise their plans. Those plans were brought to my governance board and they seemed very reasonable. Also, having seen them, I wanted to make sure that that was relayed to the public. So the Chief Constable and I held a public webcast explaining what the changes meant. And basically, in a nutshell, what it means going forward is we have the 4 E's. That's the engage, explain, encourage, and enforce. Now, that is absolutely still how the Chief Constable intends to police the COVID pandemic and the enforcement of it, the breaches of it. But after engaging, explaining, and encouraging for many, many months now, there will be more enforcement. Because it's quite right. If you've engaged with a group, you've explained to the group, you've encouraged that group or individual to comply, and they still don't, it's only right that the enforcement takes place, and it will. So we hope that people will comply, but the Chief Constable has made it perfectly clear, flagrant breaches, will be enforced, and people can expect fines if they just totally choose to disregard the regulations. That's all very well and good, but of course, I've learned very quickly that there are views on all parts of the spectrum. All are reasonable, but they are all different parts of the spectrum of what people think the police should be doing. So when I come to speak for the public, it's very difficult to speak with one voice because they speak with many voices, and I understand that. The areas which we particularly wanted to see was the expertise of the officers to make sure they don't make faux pas. The regulations are complex. I anticipate some questions on that potentially, when they should enforce a ticket, when they shouldn't, what they should be doing, the tone. So the Chief Constable, as part of that 229,000, made sure there was a 24 expertise hotline for officers who are slightly confused. Is this where we should be issuing a ticket or shouldn't we be? Again, we've got a young workforce, so that's really important to say that they will have a point of contact where officers or PCSOs can say, what's the situation here? What's the regulations? Slightly easier now we've got a lockdown. The second thing is to make sure that the law is enforced in a proportionate manner, because there was some evidence across the country, perhaps it wasn't being. So now any tickets or action taken against COVID will be reviewed on a daily basis to make sure that it is proportionate, that there's not one group, an ethnic group, which is receiving more tickets than others for no particular obvious reason, be that ethnic group, whatever characteristic, it must be proportionate and justified. And also on age as well. Young people are having a tricky old time right now. It doesn't excuse them if they decide to go into large groups and break the lockdown, but it doesn't excuse people of my age who decide to have a dinner party for 12 people when they think nobody will see. So I've been absolutely assured that they will be proportionate, they will treat people equally, and that the expertise for the officers will be there. Having a clear lockdown makes it slightly easier. Last month, when there were so many different rules across the country, and I'm not making any political point here, it made it very tricky to know quite what you should be doing. Thank you.
Okay, before I take any questions, Martin, it may be difficult for you, but I'm interested in the relationship between the marshals and others and the police, and how they either work together or very independently. I just wondered how that will work, certainly from your perspective and the Chief Constable's perspective.
Right. To be fair, Colin, I'm not hugely aware of how the Covert marshals, if that's what they're doing to operate, and I know they don't have enforcement plans, but that's very much been coordinated by the cities and the town councils. And I may ask if Ruth Greenwood is on the line, she can answer this one, because she goes to the meeting that they have. What I do know is that our ACC, Craig Holden, is working very closely with Sarah Scott, the health protection board, the health board, to make sure that's coordinated. But I don't get involved in that directly. If you want, I could call Ruth in to answer this one if she's online. If not, we could move on.
Ruth, are you able to add anything to that?
No, I'm not at the moment, not massively. There are enforcement groups that have been established under the sort of gold, silver, bronze structure that are part of what we call Op-Bridge, which is our Breach, which is our the enforcement plan around COVID. That includes council officers, so your licensing officers will be involved in that as well as the COVID team from the town hall. That's all. As that's more operational, that's not something that we are in the OPCC heavily involved in, but I can certainly get more detail. And as I said, as Martin said, that is very much Craig Holden is very much linked in with Sarah Scott on all of this. So we have assurances that joint working, planned working is absolutely in hand.
Okay, thank you for that. I think at some point it would be useful to feed back that the public really ought to know what the different roles are and how that might work. So I think it would be useful at some stage, not simply for us, but I think the public at large, to understand the roles of the different groups and enforcement groups.
That might be something, Colin, that might be something, Colin, that we go to the Health Protection Board for clarification on, because obviously that the COVID officers are council, not us. But I can certainly ask colleagues in the constabulary to support with that.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comments on this? Any questions? I can see Johnny and then Philip afterwards. You seem to be on mute, Johnny. Can you try and unmute? No, not getting anything, I'm afraid, Johnny. Shall I take Philip next, and I'll come back and see if it works, Johnny, okay? Philip?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Colin. Yeah, this whole business of COVID and enforcing the regulations is something that I feel particularly strongly about, I have to say. I had an incident a while back where somebody was in a shop and without a face mask, had been coughing over everybody and everything for the whole duration of his visit to the shop, and then came and queued up behind me to pay, and started coughing down the back of my neck from about 18 inches away. So I challenged him and got a mouthful of abuse. He wasn't going to wear a face mask, and that was it. As it happened, he was a van driver. I managed to get the registration of the van and his employer, and the shop, it was a local filling station, was very good to provide me with a CCTV picture of the bloke's face. I rang all this in attempted to ring the police control room, and it said that COVID stuff should be reported online, which I did. And then, to the credit of the control room, I got quite a quick response back from them. But the ultimate thing was said that it was going to be passed to a silver control, and then I got a message back a few days later. And in that message, I felt it was quite interesting that we were getting around 200 COVID breach complaints a week. And I think there had at that point been 6 fixed penalty notices issued. So really my question is, how many notices have we issued? How many people have we actually fined? I think my point is that if we're going to be operating a carrot and stick approach here, if we don't use the stick, people are not going to feel that the carrot is a more effective option.
Yeah. Colin, first of all, I'm glad you managed to get through online and got a quick response. That's we are trying to push people towards online because one of one's getting overloaded on the telephone lines. So that's helpful to say that. All those calls, I will come up to a point directly as best I can in a minute. All the calls that come into the police to say there's been a breach of COVID, they are recorded as antisocial behaviour. So you will see a blip in recorded antisocial behaviour. Every single call that comes of that nature is recorded as an antisocial behaviour crime, an event. The second thing is I don't know is the answer how many tickets we get a weekly total, say how many have been handed out nationally and locally. So I don't want to give the latest figures. I know at the moment we sit towards the top third of forces that issue tickets. Some have issued none, some have issued a lot more than us. If I could write to you or send you an email, that would be the way to do that, I think. I haven't got them to hand. But I think there's going to be a lot more coming out because you're right, the engaging, the explaining, encouraging, the enforcement must follow. I can look at your particular case, whether that person got a ticket or not, I don't know. But the answer is I don't know how many at the moment, except we're in the top third.
So, yeah, okay, thank you, Martin.
Yeah. Chair, if I could just go back and answer the question, I think, I forget who asked, David asked about policing numbers. My understanding at the moment, and please don't hold me to account to the exact number, because it does change on a daily basis, as you would imagine. As of the 30th of September, we had 1,168 officers on the books. We anticipate by the 31st of March, we'll have 1,194 officers on the books. Currently projected at the moment, we have rather a lot. We think it's just over 1,200 we have working, maybe even up to 1,211. But those figures do change on a very regular basis. So my projection was about right. We hope to get to around about 1,200 officers by the end of this year, which is well ahead of schedule, well above anything was actually promised by me or the Chief Constable 12 months ago.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Johnny, do you want to try again now? I can't hear you yet.
If I can see that, I'll be happy to try.
Do you want to just try one last time, Johnny? I'm afraid not. I'm sorry. Do you want to put your...
Chair, Johnny has actually put his question in the chat. The question is, can the Commissioner please give more detail about the type of breaches that are occurring which require enforcement and what the regional trends are relative to the rest of the country?
Okay.
Right. Again, offhand, apart from I can say we are in the top third of enforcement. I will probably defer to Ruth a minute. We do get a weekly called Operation Tala, which tells us our enforcement rate compared to others. I think that's in the public domain, Ruth. I'm not sure. Perhaps I'll ask someone to have a look at that whilst I'm speaking. But so I don't know the rationale, the actual ratios, except where we're about right. I just got something come through to me. Ruth, are you able to take this one? Because
yeah, of course. So I represent the OPCC at the Gold Group for COVID. So we get a weekly summary of performance in a range of issues, COVID related. We get information about warnings and fines. We are expected it to pick up. We've had 40 warnings and 6 fines in the last few weeks. There's some analysis of demographics here, but it's too small numbers to be able to sort of draw any conclusions at the moment. But we will do that analysis when we can. But I just want to reassure members that whatever we have in relation to warnings and fines, that will be scrutinised at a relevant scrutiny panel to ensure everything's fair and as it should be there. In relation to COVID-related tags, we are again expecting obviously escalations here. Most incidents happening early to late afternoon, and the weekends it goes into the evenings as well. Gloucester, we're seeing higher levels of incidents reported, but there was a bit of a spike in the Forest recently, and 44% of that related to business breaches, and that's being dealt with. Some issues in relation to Halloween parties, but we're obviously monitoring that as we go forward. But I can assure you that there is a very, very extensive report that's provided on a weekly basis that we scrutinise at that Gold Group.
Thank you, Ruth. And just, I hope that we can get, if they're not classified, I don't think they are, but they may be. We could probably get some exact figures to you to answer that question in more detail. Just again about the enforcement, I spoke to Chief Constable just the last couple of days about this issue. The constabulary are not going to be shy to be issuing £10,000 fines for people who organise breaches, gatherings during this next lockdown. He is absolutely clear about that. If people flagrantly abuse it, they organise events in contrary to the lockdown, they will not be shy in issuing a £10,000 fine and to individual fines for everybody who attends if they can. That sounds great, and I think it's the right approach, but also we'll be aware that the constabulary sent officers down to assist Avon and Somerset who were facing a very large rave, I think hundreds of people involved, and the Chief Constable will send a police support unit there to help that. I'm glad to do so. We always help our neighbours. So there are extremes all the way through. And Chair, you may want me to cover the issue on the Welsh border, because that was also something that got a little bit tricky over the last few weeks.
Yeah, if you could say what happened in the last few weeks on that.
Well, the issue is, as we go into lockdown, Wales comes out of lockdown, and we obviously have we have a border with Gwent Police. So where we have two very different sets of regulations, it is very important the officers and the staff are very clearly briefed, and people who live on that border who can see a pub. So I think it's for next Monday, you can go to the pub in Wales, but you can't go to the pub, obviously, in England, and it's only 1 mile down the road or even less than that. So we've been working closely with the National Police Streets Council and the Home Office to get absolute clarity. We have the border with Gwent Police, Avon and Somerset, a little easier for them. They just have the Severn Bridge, but as you move up through West Mercia and into, I think it's Cheshire, might be, there's 4 forces on the English side and 4 forces on the Welsh side. So we are working with them to get very clear protocols of how the regulations differ, because they do differ quite substantially, and what the activity on the border would be. The Chief Constable tells me we are not having border checks. That will not happen. But, of course, there will be activity on the border. They're rightly so, because if people decide to go out to the pubs in Wales and come back drinking, they can expect to get stopped by the police to do a breathalyser. Their normal policing will continue. And this is a personal view. I haven't actually spoken to Chief about this. If people do decide to come from Wales in flagrant breaches of the Welsh lockdown into England, I can't imagine why the police in Gloucestershire would not report that back to Wales to say this person was seen in the Forest of Dean, openly breaching your regulations. Here is his or her details for any action you want to take. I see no issue with that, but it is a sensitive area and it will get slightly tricky if different regulations in Wales to England. But I'm happy to take questions on that because I know it did feature in the press recently, and it's pretty much sorted.
Anyone, any questions on that, on the border issues? I don't see any, but it must be very difficult for people who would normally, say, go shopping in Chepstow, who live in Gloucestershire. You know, the fact that they pop across the border for a drink is another matter, but their normal shopping habits may be to go to Chepstow or wherever, and that must be really quite difficult.
You're absolutely right, Chair. It is very difficult. That's why, you know, it's important, you know, in the 4Es that we, well, not just us, the government, the councils explain very clearly, unfortunately, however awkward it is, that is the law now, but we encourage them to keep that. And we'd only enforce that, you know, having done all those early stages, that, you know, I'm sorry, you can't do it. And if you know, blatantly knowing all that information, you do it, you're going to get a ticket. Probably, I'm not sure whether you're going to get it in Wales or in England. It is complicated, Chair. You're absolutely right. And we're talking about areas like Tuts Hill. You know, they have Welsh postcodes. I think a lot of the children there go to school in Wales, or the Welsh children go to school in England, and their doctor's surgeries cross the border. But there's all exceptions around about that. But let me assure you, what you won't be seeing is there never were roadblocks at the Forest of Dean. There was some police activity, but that won't be happening. It'll all be very proportionate. But I'm afraid if people do decide to break the rules, they risk a ticket. You know, every time we go out in our cars, we know if we decide to go, you know, 38 miles an hour and a 30, you risk getting a ticket. You take a chance.
Okay, thanks for that. So I didn't see anyone else with a question. Oh yeah, Philip.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. I'm led to believe that of the positive COVID tests in the county, perhaps not a majority, but certainly a very significant proportion of those positive tests have come out of Hartpury and Cirencester universities and the higher education facilities in Gloucester City. What action are the police taking to ensure, particularly areas where there's a high incidence of positive tests, the regulations are being adhered to?
Well, I think first of all we would look to the public health to deal with that originally, and the school itself to make sure that there isn't a breach of that. We'll see when we're doing what Manchester appeared to do, is to try to cage them in with Harris fencing reported on the news this morning. I'm not aware that they are actively breaching. The Hartpury campus is quite isolated. That would be a question for Sarah Scott. Sarah Scott. It's definitely a matter for public health. And, you know, Craig Holt on our ACC meets with him on a regular basis. And if they feel there is a need for police support, it will be given. But it's a matter for the County Council, Public Health, Sarah Scott, with backup from the police, backup from their COVID marshals if they require it, but not primarily a police activity.
Okay, I think that was everyone. Do you want to go on to the police and crime plan refresh, which I think is Chris leading on this one?
Thank you, Colin. Good morning, everybody. As you know, at the last Police and Crime panel, we gave a presentation on the kind of the overarching view of where we were going with the refresh. I know Colin as chair and Councillor Dave Norman attended the launch at the Sabrina Centre on the 8th of October, which obviously also coincided with the opening of the Sabrina Centre. Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, was due to come, but unfortunately due to a COBRA meeting, she couldn't attend, but she sent a video in advance. But we had Kit Malthouse, the policing minister, and it was, I think, overall it was a really good day. Obviously, we launched the plan, and we also had the policing minister around to kind of look at the plan and also look at the centre. Now, as we said previously, the refresh does not replace the existing plan, which I know you've seen, and the delivery that sits alongside it. This has been developed in consultation with our new priority lead, which hopefully in due course they'll be able to come to the panel as well and give you a bit of an oversight on what they're thinking, but also with the constabulary and other partners as well. Now, the delivery plans themselves are under current development. The priority leads are kind of getting to grip with their role. A lot of this, as you can imagine, has been delayed due to COVID and other priorities elsewhere, but our priority leads are kind of cracking on with the new structures and the plans themselves to make them have specifics to really drive forward in the next 6 to 12 months. We're hoping that in terms of the delivery plans, we can bring them to the panel in the new year. Reason being, and the reason for the delay on this one, is we've tried to kind of streamline the whole delivery of the police and crime plan to kind of work with the constabulary better. Because the constabulary currently has refreshed its corporate strategy, but they're also doing a lot more work with regards to performance framework. So the kind of the machinations behind the scenes, but in terms of how the constabulary reports towards the police and crime plan, and also their own general performance, we're trying to make it all streamlined and all as one. So what they're currently doing, and we're also currently been delayed because of the government as well, because the government's brought in what's called neighbourhood crimes, and we're waiting for kind of clarification from the government what they're going to include in that neighbourhood crimes area. So it's kind of a watching brief at the moment. I think it's an honest one. The work's going on behind the scenes, but in terms of the exact delivery plans, we will bring them to the panel in the new year. What I've sent to Andrea to send round to all members is a bit of a video of the opening of the Sabrina Centre as well, to give you a sense of where we are. But over the next coming months, we'll be able to bring the delivery plans to the board, and there'll be loads of awareness raising campaigns coming on with each of the priority areas. And that's it from me, I suppose.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone got any questions on that or any comments on the refreshed plan? We've got Dave Norman showing, and then Karen afterwards.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd just like to follow on what Chris said there in respect of the refresh plan. Yes, I was invited to attend, and I was delighted to do so. I'll save my comments on the Sabrina Centre until we get to the appropriate agenda item, but they will be positive, so I don't want anybody panicking in the background. In respect of the priorities that the document shows, the one obviously of significant interest to myself is the safe and social roads element. We have, we did establish, and county councillors on this call and officers will know that currently there is a cabinet panel sitting looking at road safety across the county. And at the first of those meetings, the Police and Crime Commissioner did come and give a very interesting outline in respect of his view on road safety across the county. Obviously, the County Council has a statutory responsibility, as does the constabulary, but there clearly are others who can, without doubt, make a massive contribution in respect of safe and social roads across the county. And I'm looking forward to hear from the priority lead on safe and social roads, Nigel Lloyd-Jones, who is hopefully speaking at the next one of the panel meetings. We have 2 panel meetings left to run, and then I have a responsibility to deliver the points of the panel to a scrutiny committee towards the end of January. Now, I believe that the only way that we can improve these issues around safe and social roads is those that have a clear responsibility, a statutory responsibility, must work with those who have key elements to drive into that piece of work to make them safer. I've had a meeting with Martin recently, in fact, only this week, and I'm convinced that we are both singing from the same song sheet in respect of safe driving and social driving across the county. So I welcome this. I look forward to further developments, and I look forward to delivering a report to scrutiny at the end of January.
Thank you, Dave. That sounds very positive.
Colin,
Chris,
can I
do you want to come back?
Yes, thank you. Just to say thank you to Councillor Norman, and he's absolutely right. There's a lot of good activity that is ongoing and I think we've all got the kind of duty to work closer together on this. But I think there's been a lot of good work over the last couple of years with regards to the education side that GFRS have delivered, and we're really, really proud of that. Nigel Lloyd-Jones as the new priority leader has some great and fantastic ideas. Only this last week, we've seen an example of communities themselves stepping up with regards to the kind of use of ANPR in their communities. And we funded a bit of a project in Rodborough where the GDPR could have got in the way of progress, I believe, and thankfully that's been kind of kicked into touch, and the community there can step up. But Councillor Norman's absolutely right. We do want to kind of look at this in more detail, and I know we've had some good conversations with the fire service in terms of some of the work with regards to road safety coming under the Safer Gloucestershire banner, so we can kind of join up a little bit more. But there's some good work and good activity on this one, and I think it's quite exciting, really.
Chair, could I just add to that? Because I realised in my update I should have given that. It was very significant. I totally agree with everything Councillor Norman has said and Chris. The community did a cracking job. All these community cameras were under threat because of GDPR, and they were on the verge of being turned off. The OPCC funded an appeal, but put in the case to the Surveillance Commissioner. All we did was put the money up and said, yes, go for it, we'll support you as a bit of a test case. And it was for the Rodborough area that they did it. And now they've got the Surveillance Commissioner himself has said, no, these are okay to go ahead. They're not personal data until they go to the police, and then the police are allowed to have that data. So we were on the verge of turning off numerous community speed cameras across the county. But thankfully, I give the credit to Charles Pedrick, who is a councillor, I think he's a councillor, I'm not sure, in the Rodborough area, for taking it on. And they now have a 5-year licence to run their systems. Of course, what it means, they've been the pathfinders. So other councils, district or county or parish can now go down that line. But it really was touch and go whether we'd have to turn those off. And it would have been a shocking loss of investment over many years of the community and the OPCC. So well done to Charles.
Thank you. Karen? Can't hear you yet, Karen.
Can you hear me now? Yep.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, fine. First of all, as a district councillor for Rodborough, I would support the efforts that the parish council did do to get surveillance cameras working, and I know that they really appreciated the support they had from the police in taking that work forward and actually making our parish a safer parish. I've got 2 questions on the plan. The first one is on the safer roads, and I did have a look at the inspectorate report on road safety, which was called Road Policing Not Optional. The one finding they had from that was actually that police aren't properly trained to do policing roads. And I just wondered whether that was being reflected. I know it's a national target, how that's being reflected. The other question I've got is around the young people becoming adults and my continued concern about young people who are further up in the criminal justice system. We had an interesting debate on the statistics last time, and I have looked at the most recent up-to-date statistics, and the first-time entrant rate, as you say, is fine, but I am concerned that the number of young people going into custody in Gloucestershire and the reoffending isn't quite so healthy, but I can't see how that would be addressed within the plan.
Sorry, but there's something wrong on my line. I didn't get that. If we could relay it or somebody else take the question.
I can answer the first one with regard to the road safety. I know there was a national report out which basically said that road safety was lower down the priority list for police forces than it should be, and that's probably one of the reasons. Well, we've always had it as a priority in Gloucestershire, and we're going to stick with it as a priority. And actually, one of the things that Nigel's done coming in is look at the KSIs in the county, and actually we are relatively low, but it is going up and across the board at all areas. But one of the things we're doing with regards to safe and social roads is we're currently about to survey all parish councils with regard to that priority. In terms of the police themselves, with the bringing back of road policing in-house from the regional system, I think we're probably in a better place than we were a couple of years ago. So we're quite confident in terms of the way the police are doing it, but it's always work in progress. We also, I think, in terms of that priority, we have the National Lead for Road Policing in the country in Superintendent Paul Keesey. So he's linked in with that work and he has access to some of the best academia there. So, we're quite pleased and hopeful about that priority. With regards to the young people and child-friendly, I think that's one that we'll probably need to come back to you with more detail on, Karen. Our new priority lead, Jane Dye, was just getting to grips with that system. Previously, we had Kate Langley, who was working for Prospects and was heavily involved in the criminal justice system and pushing forward Children's First, which was still backing and pushing on as well. So it will all be in the plan. I think a bit more detail will come towards you in the new year on that one.
Just need to unmute Karen again.
Sorry. The custody rate in Gloucestershire, the current custody rate is very high. And obviously, if we're trying to make good citizens, one thing we know is people who go into custody, particularly at the time of COVID, they're extremely vulnerable. So I'd just like to flag that up.
I didn't get the first part of the question, but thank you. We take that really seriously. What should happen is before a child is taken into custody, that they would ring into the Children's First programme or to get advice to see if there's a way that can be avoided. The moment they're in, they are treated very differently to an adult. I know that. And every effort is made to make sure they don't stay there overnight. And sometimes there just is nowhere else for them to go. I get the reports to say how hard they've tried to get that young person out of custody into a safe place. Sometimes it isn't possible because there's just nowhere to go. And I'm not pointing fingers at anybody here. What is rather good right now is the County Council and the police, the OPCC, are really getting to grips with this under the, from our child-friendly caveat to make sure we complement each other. But really, we don't want young people in our custody if we can help it. We don't want them in prison. But occasionally it is unavoidable, and they will be taken to custody.
This isn't overnight arrest. This is actually getting custodial sentences for serious offence, well, presumably serious offences.
Okay, I didn't get the first part of the question. It was just a really bad line. Yeah, I apologise for that.
I think, Karen, if you've got any specifics that you want to ask with this one, why don't you send an email into the office and we'll get you some more detailed response.
Okay, that would be good if you could do that, Karen. I've got Martin Smith, but before that, Martin, Andrea, you were wanting to...
I just wanted to let the panel know, particularly given Karen's comments, that at next week's Cabinet meeting, the County Council Cabinet are receiving the Gloucestershire Youth Offending Service. It's the response to COVID recovery plan, but it's also the wider youth justice recovery plan. So, and that's also going to go to children's scrutiny in January. So I will email that link to all panel members so they're aware of that wider work that's going on.
From my perspective, Andrea, thank you for that, because one of the things I was going to say is that the Youth Justice Partnership Board papers does cover a lot of what Karen's asking. So maybe if, Karen, you'd like to watch the County Council meeting, and then if there's any follow-up questions you have for us, do let us know.
Okay, Martin, you were indicating?
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yep, that's
okay. Thanks for all this. I've actually just got an observation to make regarding the plan. I appreciate and welcome the tenor of it and the comments in the plan, notably the comments about the young people and they are our future and the way the police should see through the eyes of young people when they work with them. I think that sets a lovely tenor. Then we've got the interest in old people and their occasional vulnerability, stuff like that. And then most notably, the setting in the context of COVID, putting it right there next to the work of police and helping us to understand that it has such a big impact. And the other national and world developments, again, the plan refers to them. So the police and crime plan is set in that much wider context. And so my observation was, I think the title is something of a misnomer, Police and Crime Plan. I'll tell you what, if I was going to a library and I was going to pick that up, I'd expect it to be about burglaries and bobbies on the street. And what we're working on is, to me, it seems so much more than that. It's about community well-being and community harmony and all this sort of issue. I don't think Martin can change the title of the plan. Maybe when they have the review of police and crime committees, they can think about things like that. That's what I wanted to say.
Can I respond to that, Chair? First of all, Martin
Yes,
is
please do.
absolutely spot on. There are many commissioners of all colours who think that the word Police and Crime Commissioner doesn't actually explain what we do very well. But it is a statutory requirement. It has to be a police and crime plan. There are some people who think it should all be about enforcement. You know, we are a police service. We're not law enforcers. We do part of that. And it's absolutely right. If we want to make long-term changes in quality of life, you do look at it through the eyes of younger people, and you do feel for the elderly. So you're absolutely, as you know, there are some people who would say it's all about locking people up. I don't think people on this panel are like that. But I really am grateful for you saying that, because it's from the heart of my office, what we're trying to do. And in these tricky times, it is very hard for some young people right now. And I will just say this, you know, some young people have had their A-levels, their education completely put out of kilter by COVID. Their employment, their university education, their future. And we must do everything we can to support them. And if you look forward to what's projected in the new year, it's going to be very tricky for all of us with unemployment. And I remember policing through a period of high unemployment. I expect you do as well, Martin. It's not nice. So we are going to prepare for that. We're here for the county. We're fighting for Gloucestershire to make it a good, decent place. And, you know, thank you very much, Martin.
Okay, I think Martin's point is a good one. So that's Martin Smith's comment on Martin himself. The police and crime plan will be a statutory document, and it has to be headed up like that. But maybe, Martin Searle, that is, you could look at, you know, a subheading on that, which would be quite, you know, good. I mean, don't use this, but it's kind of the police and crime plan, what the police do for the community. You know, that's terrible. But I think you could work on that maybe.
Yeah.
Martin Smith, you want to come back?
Can I instantly support that? Are we looking for some sort of strap line about community well-being? I'd agree. And I would invite the panel to urge Martin as a group to think about that.
Yeah. Do you need much urging, Martin?
No, I don't. The most important thing is the delivery of that plan, because you're right. It's not just a policing plan. It involves the entire community if it's going to be successful. It requires interaction with, we heard for Dave Norman about safe and social roads. It requires us to work together to be successful. And that is the key of it. You know, my office who may be listening, well, this will be like manna from heaven, because sometimes we just say people haven't got a clue what we do, the breadth and the extent of it. Richard, my chief executive, the amount of work he is doing with the voluntary and the community sector to get us through COVID is absolutely outstanding. You know, so policing is just one part of it. My holding to account of the chief constable is just one part of it. It's a big role, and in the police and crime commissioners review, the government recognise that. You know, they don't want PCCs just to be super enforcers. They want them to be community champions who understand probation service, which you understand, Martin, all the elements of it. And one thing, you can't do an update. We are determined to protect the voluntary and community sector in all its guises. And that includes, you know, the faith organisations who are doing miracles. That's what they're supposed to do, isn't it, of course, during COVID as well. So the more we can work together on that, it is an absolute plea. And it's not just all about crime levels, because they are pretty low in this county. and we can do good stuff. Thank you very much.
I think I saw. Well, I've got Steve Robinson. Your hand is up, so I'll take Steve, and then I can see that Philip wants to make a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Colin. Yeah, under Every Crime Matters regarding domestic abuse, and I can remember Martin saying at the start of the other lockdown that we had that he was thinking that people would be staying in and wouldn't be going out to clubs and whatever else, and maybe it mightn't be as bad as we thought. But, you know, we do understand that during that last one, a lot of drink was consumed in the household. That's what they tell us. And does he think that was there a concern with extra issues of domestic abuse last time, and should we be aware of it this time, please?
Steve, I will try to answer that, but if my team want to come in with more detail, absolutely. Domestic abuse, it was counted badly during the early stages of the lockdown. I think it was counted twice in as much as the amount of information coming to the national hotline was the actual audit wasn't very good. But undoubtedly there was serious incidents of domestic abuse during the lockdown. Whether it was any more, I think is quite hard to say, because a lot of the people who also have a controlling nature were very happy having their partner or their victim, what to call it, who couldn't go out, so they were quite happy with that. The biggest piece of work we've been doing is to make sure that the police do attend it, and the organisations, which are primarily voluntary sectors or third sector organisations, didn't go under, and that there was still face-to-face counselling for victims, and making sure that victims of domestic abuse could escape and not be prisoners in their own homes. So I should have mentioned, in the Ministry of Justice, the office was very successful in receiving additional funds, £167,000 roughly, to support victims of domestic abuse, primarily trying to keep afloat these remarkable third sector charities which do that work. So I'm not aware that there was a massive increase, Steve. Please feel free to contact me, my team, if I got that wrong. But we put a huge amount of additional money into that for my fund and for Ministry of Justice funding as well. So that's good. I'm afraid we did apply to the Ministry of Justice for substantial money for perpetrator funding. It took a huge amount of time, but we were unsuccessful, which was unfortunate. We kind of thought we would be unsuccessful, but we felt we'd have to apply anyway.
Can I come in, Martin? Just to add a bit. Just to say, Steve, in terms of the priority, you'll see under the Every Crime Matters, Every Contact Counts, we've got a commitment there to working in partnership to reduce domestic abuse and sexual violence. There's some great work going on in terms of the sexual violence partnership in the county, which was spearheaded by Rich Bradley in terms of our office and setting up a specific group looking at sexual violence. In terms of domestic abuse, some of the homicide reviews sit under Safer Gloucestershire, which obviously you know I chair. There is a review going on working with the county council regarding domestic abuse and domestic abuse leadership within the county, because I think we all acknowledge that domestic abuse is such a big issue, and most statutory organisations agenda as a priority. Like most things, though, we just need to join up a little bit better. So I'm hoping probably in the next 6 months to a year, Safer Gloucestershire will get a bigger grip, wider agenda, because we're doing some great stuff with regards to the domestic homicide reviews and learning lessons. There was a lot of good activity in terms of campaigns and awareness raising during the last lockdown. I think it's going forward, how do we make sure we're all joined up? And that's the opportunity and the leadership around the DA agenda.
Could I just come back?
If you wanted to come back.
Yeah, could I just come back on that one? Excuse me. With the schools and everything else, and your schools officer, I know you've only got one in per district, but that's great to have one in every district. But are they able to? So much goes on behind closed doors that children have to endure, and you hope that somebody's picking that up, maybe taking it back into the school, and somebody's picking that up. I know it can't be just your job, but are our these new police officers, are they working very closely with the school on that sort of thing?
They are. I mean, the primary function, I think, was sit with the school and with the county council to make sure they've got those services in place if alarm bells are raised. The school liaison officers are primarily there more for an education purpose, and they would probably not become involved in they were signposts, but not be doing the investigation.
Yeah, but they would be able to when they visit schools to make sort of children aware that they're able to speak to teachers regarding that, and it's
absolutely.
Not, yeah.
Absolutely, and I hope that every officer, every police and community sports officer would give the same information if they met those children, those young people in the park or in any setting. It is taken really very, very seriously. Children's services are massively important for the police. Again, in my holding to account role, I asked the constabulary to give me reassurances that all the issues that were raised in the 2017 HMIC report, when they were told they needed to improve, were being dealt with, and we would have that level of reassurance we were still good, or we got good and remained good. I received that assurance just the day before yesterday.
Okay, thanks. I've seen that Philip wants to speak, and then Brian, but someone else just tried to butt in then. Who was it?
Sorry, Colin, it was Chris Briley again. I just wanted to clarify something that I've had the information now, and it's regarding Karen McEwen's thing regarding young people in custody. I think it's important to say this while we're broadcasting. In terms of Karen's view, there's too many young people going in the system. In the last quarter, if she looks at the Youth Justice Partnership Board minutes, the increase is actually very, very small. We've had an increase of 6 to 7 young people, and there was only 1 young person sentenced to custody in the previous quarter. So we're happy to give Karen the details, but to paint a picture of too many young people going through and getting custodial sentences is not true. The increase, small numbers in custody from 6 to 7, and only 1 person to custody. So I think it's really important to say that.
Could I just respond to that? Because I've been looking at the YJB figures, and it's actually about what's relative to other areas and what is the corporate. So it might be worth having a look at the published YJB figures.
Have a look at the report, Karen, and any positives come back.
Okay, we'll just leave that one for now. There'll be the report that's coming to Cabinet, and then we can pick it up at a subsequent meeting. And particularly if you want it on the agenda, Karen, we can put it on the agenda. As I say, I've got Philip and then Brian. I just wanted to say in response to Steve that on the dashboard that we get as county councillors, I know Chris Spencer is putting a reasonable amount of information up on domestic abuse. Clearly, they were expecting quite a spike. It's still less than they thought, and there was thought to be a kind of reporting spike after lockdown. That I think it went up, but it wasn't as high as they thought. And today, nationally, this is. So I don't know if there's any cases locally. The Children's Commissioner was saying that there had been a rise in serious abuse of babies in particular. As I say, this was a national story, so I don't know whether that's translated locally, but we'll be picking those issues up at Children's Scrutiny. So I've got Philip, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. I'll just issue a warning here. I'm likely to be slightly controversial here, certainly in context of this meeting, though I don't believe I'm controversial in terms of the feeling of the population of the county. So the first thing I want to say is I understand the commitment to community engagement, and I would compliment Martin and Chris on the way in which that is handled in the plan. However, I don't think that we can avoid the need for the crime and punishment aspect of policing to be voiced here. The punishment element, in my view, and certainly in the view of most people that I talk to out on the streets, they feel that the punishment element is an essential part of policing for its value as a deterrent, and I would hope that that's not going to be missed. Now, I accept that there's a lot of things going on behind closed doors, if you like, hidden crimes at the moment, and I think that this should apply to those as well. The police need to be active and dealing with domestic abuse and child abuse behind closed doors during lockdown, and it needs to be a high priority in my view. So I think we've had various comments during the course of this meeting about it's not all about issuing tickets, it's not all about the number of people that are locked up. I'm sorry, guys, but I think it is. We do need to be issuing tickets in the context of COVID. I'm sure we issued lots of tickets in the context of speeding and other traffic offences. They should have similar priority. And again, at the risk of being controversial, I'm sorry, but this does include young people. If young people have done something which is severe enough for them to be locked up, they should be locked up. It's quite straightforward. If they've broken the law, in my view, they should be locked up. If we don't do that, there is absolutely no deterrent for others to not do it. Sorry if it's controversial, but I know that's the view that's held out on the streets.
Philip, I don't think it
just before you come in there, Martin, I don't want to get into a very long debate on the whole punishment issue and whether diversion is better and so on, because I think we will take it as that's your view, as you've expressed, because my guess would be there'll be a number of people on the committee that might have a different view, but your right to express your view is quite important. Martin, if you want to keep it fairly short, and then I'll go to Brian.
Because it's very relevant to my role, because it's not my role. That's why I say it. The police are not shy to issue tickets. By the way, if they issue tickets, trying to get those tickets enforced through the courts, best of luck. But also, a lot of people are prosecuted. Huge amounts of people are arrested. I think it's about 20 or 30 a day. I'm not sure exactly. But crime and punishment is the matter for the courts and the prisons, which we're coming on to next. Now, all the police do is investigate crime as best they can, issue the ticket, and they do a lot of them. But that's when it gets tricky. It's up to the courts to decide what should happen, should be locked up or not, nothing to do with the police whatsoever. And it's up for the MOJ to get those cases to court, not a lot to do with the police either. So in many ways, I think I agree with you, maybe not in the same proportion. It's complementary. But as we come on to the next agenda item, trying to get people before the court now is pretty tough.
Okay, thanks, Martin. I've got Brian, and then I can see Lorraine wanting to speak.
Yeah. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Martin.
Morning.
Basically, before the previous lockdown, it was quite widely predicted that the crime rate would drop. Basically, countrywide, the quoted figure, or that I can remember anyway, is about 20%. But Gloucestershire, that was a 20% reduction in crime rate. But the Gloucestershire figure was 6%. So my first, I don't believe in long-winded questions and justifying the question, but my question to Martin and the police force is: have we learned any lessons? Second, as for the locking up of people and whatever else, I agree with what Martin, I think, has been trying to achieve, is that we don't give people records, basically, of being locked up, and it marks them for the rest of their life. However, I don't see a problem in perhaps penalising somebody by locking them up and making them realise that they did something wrong, and but they're not necessarily making a record that counts against them for the rest of their life. I wonder if you care to comment about both of those, please.
Yeah,
Okay, Martin?
let me just pick the last one off first. You know, it's really up to the magistrates and the judges to decide who goes to prison and who don't. There is that separation, which is quite right. And I can quite rightly be held to account, I will be in a minute, around crime levels. But I'm not going to be held to account for whether a judge or magistrate send me to prison or not, or for how long, because that is an absolute separation of somebody else's remit from mine. Okay, on the, you're quite right. We anticipate during lockdown that crime will come down. We anticipate it will come down again during this period. With regards to the actual amount it came down nationally, the overall figures are correct. But if you recall, I think it was September 2019, the Chief Constable came to the panel and explained to the panel that we would see an increase in recorded crime because of the HMIC crime data integrity inspection, which the constabulary was found wanting in the way it recorded certain levels of crime. So that differential between what was seen in some parts of the country and others was absolutely predictable and absolutely in line with what the panel were told in September by the Chief Constable. You know, it wasn't Gloucestershire who was an outlier. The vast majority of forces in the country were told that the way they were recording crime was not compliant with the latest regulations. This was across the whole country, and at different phases, we saw a readjustment of the figures. Now, our readjustment of the figures, just as the Chief said we would during the last period. Other forces saw it beforehand, but the trend in those areas remains down. So the very honest answer is we were in line, our reduction, with the rest of the country, but the way the impact of the CDI report hit us last year, it hit other forces perhaps the year before and some the year before that. So, you know, to make the lots, I know, Brian, that is absolutely where we are, and I'm not going to allow the figures to skew the good work of the constabulary. That was absolutely predictable. It's an accounting issue, which the Chief Constable came, explained how some incidents were reported in Gloucestershire differently to other parts of the country, and he also explained the absurdity of that. And I think the panel accepted the absurdity of some of the things that were being reported. So there we are. We're not an outlier at all. We saw the same levels of reduction in reality as the rest of the country.
Thank you for the explanation.
Yeah,
okay,
unfortunately, it plays out differently in different people who will try to make, and there is a big issue about people trying to set out Gloucestershire as an outlier, an inadequate force. It's far from it. It's a bloody good force, and people who attack it need to be ashamed of themselves. And you're not one of those, Brian. Don't get me wrong.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Lorraine?
Thank you, Colin. Martin, I have a slight concern about, this is before the current lockdown. Talking to a police officer who explained to me how they went about getting to the point where they would fine people for infringement. And while I appreciate we don't want to be the heavy-handed, bullish type of police force, and I absolutely agree that we should be informing and educating people before we go along the route of fining them, I do think that one session of information and education is more than adequate. And that on the second occasion, they should then be fined, not on the third. So that someone is found doing something, they're educated, then found doing something again, and they're educated again, and then they get fined. I don't think there's any need for this step in the middle. I think the officers should be able to do the first thing, and second time, fine them. That's my opinion.
Lorraine, I think that's pretty much where we are. I don't think you would find the force would disagree with you much on that. So I won't go over that again. I just think some people should be fined or prosecuted first time. I think Dominic Cummings should have been prosecuted and fined first time. I said that nationally, I'll say it again now. Of course, police force huge problems ever since that incident.
Sorry, I'm not during the lockdown about people who were going into shops not wearing their masks and abiding by the rule of 6 and so on and so forth. At some point, we're going to come out of this lockdown. We'll be in that place again. And although I agree, there are some instances where perhaps someone could be fined straight away. I do appreciate the fact that they may not be quite fully aware of what they're doing, but that when we go back to that stage, there's no need for the police steps. Thank you.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Thank you.
I can't see anyone indicating, and I'd like to move on if we can.
Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
just a minute. Yeah, Andrea?
Given that the panel did not indicate its full support for the plan last time because it didn't have the full detail, it would be, it would be helpful for the members of the panel to indicate that now that they have the full plan, they do fully support it.
I'm not sure I can see most people, so can you just raise your hand? Well, actually, before that, is there anyone who wouldn't want to support the plan? I can't see anybody, so I'm going to take that as the panel supports the police and crime plan. Yeah? Objections, so I think that's the easiest way. I'm not going to call individual people and ask them to vote yes or no. I think we've got better things to do. Martin, do you want to carry on? I think it's you.
Yeah, where are we? It is on the criminal justice. We're there now, are we? Criminal justice update. Item 7, Chair?
Yes, that's correct. Criminal justice update.
Okay. Just to be really, there's not a lot to add from what I said, I think, last panel or the one before. Is first of all, I am not accountable for the criminal justice system once it leaves the police force and moves into the courts and the prison service. But of course, I have an interest in it as chair of the criminal justice board, the local criminal justice board. And just to help members to understand what that is, I chair that, and I bring together all the relevant parties who are trying to deliver justice, the system, not the operational office of the system, to move things through from the commission of the offence right to the prison sentence, if that's appropriate, or the sentence. And we talk on a monthly basis at the moment during COVID. I won't rehearse my views about the state of the system generically, but during COVID, we have an issue, they have an issue, and it is the responsibility of the Ministry of Justice and the HMCTS, the courts service. We have the two courts in the county, both are struggling at the moment. This is a matter of fact, this is not a matter of opinion. I think when I spoke to you last time, we have 900 or 1,000 cases waiting in the magistrates' court, and there are people on this panel who will be more expert on me to know what they comprise of, and they are still increasing on pretty much a daily basis. We are now well over 1,100 cases which are blocked up in the magistrates' court. Absolutely not because of the efforts and the industrial way that the people there who work, the magistrates, they are doing their very best. Structurally, it doesn't work, that the system doesn't work, and nobody at the meeting, as I chaired less than a few weeks ago, said there was any other solution apart from building more capacity into the system in the way of a Nightingale or additional court. Nobody, and there was all CPS there, the defence, everybody was there, so they could not find a solution without additional capacity going through. When you move into the Crown Court, then again, our Crown Court in Gloucester, unfortunately, the maximum you're going to have there is one trial at any time, because it cannot be made truly COVID secure. It just cannot be, and you only have the most basic, simple trials there. And again, without some additional capacity, it can't work effectively. So it's an increasing problem. I can't fix it because I'm not the Ministry of Justice and I'm not the court service. But it's all right to highlight this to you. For all the work the police do, trying to get cases to court is really difficult. And even though they can prioritise domestic abuse cases and some of the more serious cases, it just means the others fall further back. Listing now for trials at least 8 months. In some areas, potentially ours, probably not going to get to a trial till 2022. And I'm not scaremongering. This is across the country, and we are not in a good place at all. As a Commissioner, the reason it's relevant to me, apart from being the chair of the Criminal Justice Board, you will be aware I offer both Cirencester Magistrates Court and Stroud Magistrates Court to the Ministry of Justice in April. Progress has been painfully slow. I just want to clarify, there was in the press said that we had misled the Ministry of Justice about the condition of Cirencester Court. That came in a letter I had from the Minister. I don't think he was deliberately calling me out on that. I think he was misled. Can I just assure you that Cirencester Magistrates Court is in good order. It's been surveyed by our own internal surveyor. We have priced up all the work that was necessary to bring it back into full operational use as a court, with the exception of the IT and their staff. It comes to about £25,000, which in the context of the criminal justice system and policing is a very small amount of money. And that sort of stuff is simply just testing the boiler again, draining down the system to make sure there's no listeria in it, checking everything is okay. It was in full use less than a year ago when we had the mock trials there. It's a good building. I have put a date on it now, a date when they must decide by the 27th of November. They have to make that decision by then, or we will withdraw the offer because we need the building for other things. I am very, very frustrated about it. I have been in correspondence with the Ministry of Justice, the Minister. I think they're trying to be helpful, but I can't report any progress at all at the moment to you.
Okay, thank you. Any comments on that? Brian, did you indicate? You'll have to unmute, Brian.
I was thinking about signaling, yes. I would like to make a suggestion for the future of the court system, and I would think that the attendees at court, and I mean all attendees, should be asked the question how they got to the court that day. In other words, did they walk? Did they ride a bike? Did they drive a car, taxi, or otherwise? And I would like to think that that kind of study could be taken into account as to the future of the court system. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. I forgot to unmute. Philip, I can see you indicating.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. A very short question. Martin, if you say that the backlog of cases in our courts are 1,100, I think you said, I'd just be interested to know how many cases are actually in court being heard at any one time.
Very few. So if they're guilty pleas, they may go through. I don't have that, because the reason I say it, Philip, is that I am not responsible for the court system. I get involved when it starts to jam up because the police are trying to put cases through. We do have that throughput, but it's hugely restricted because of the COVID situation. And it's trials are the main problem. It's people who dispute their guilt. And I will stand corrected, people know better. This is a really big issue. People who have been processed by the police, they dispute their guilt to a degree. We have several quite high-profile cases coming through. It's those trials which we can't get through the system. And, you know, they do need to be resolved. They really do. And, of course, as people know that you can't get trials through the court, perhaps they think to say, tell you what, I think I'll plead not guilty then, because it will be 2022 before this happens, by which time the witnesses were gone off the boil, don't want to do, move on with life. And this is a really big issue. And when it comes to multi-handed cases, and again, this is responsibility of others, not me, where you've got multiple defendants, we can't put those through as well. So if you get a situation where half a dozen people have been charged with the same offence, maybe an affray or a robbery or burglary, there's nowhere in this county you can get them to court at the moment if they go not guilty. It's really serious, really serious.
Yeah, okay. Well, I thank you for that. I understand that. I mean, I completely support people's right to defend their innocence. However, it's a bit like sharing a meeting, isn't it, Colin? That if you've got a huge backlog at the end of the meeting and you're not making progress, you're never going to get to the end of it. And surely this is a principle that the court system should actually realise, that they can't just keep stacking on the bottom of the list. They need to find a way of doing more at the time when they're not doing very much.
Okay, point taken.
Chair, can I come in?
Who was that?
It's Richard Bradley. Can I just make a comment?
Yes. Go ahead, Richard.
Thanks, Chair. Just to let you know, in furtherance to what Martin has just said about the slowness of the HMCTS, I've now got a call at 12:30 with the Director of Finance from the MOJ to try and move this on.
Okay, thanks, Richard. That's really helpful.
Could I just stop and tail it, Chair, but just by saying the only reason I'm involved in this is because I'm trying to be helpful. I have absolutely no statutory responsibility for this at all. It's just that we happen to own 2 courts because we wanted to buy it for the integrity of our estate. We are going well above what we're supposed to do. And, you know, you would have thought they would have snapped our hand off for it, because I don't know any other location that's better than to revamp a court that's already there. They are in good condition, but it's completely beyond my proper remit. It's just I own this court. I don't want any money for it. When I say I mean the OPCC. It's taken up a lot of time of the police estates team to work with them. You know, they should be snapping our hand off to have this, but they're not. And that is the only remit I have, is to offer to help. I can't fix it if they don't want to take up my offer.
Okay, Martin, thanks for that. I've got Andrea. You wanted to say something, then I've got Lorraine, and
Well, actually, Chair, I'm currently being Councillor Johnny Brownstein again. He has a few questions which I'm not sure Martin will be able to answer, but I will ask them for him. Can the Commissioner give any insight as to why this is taking so long? When was the offer of the court originally made? Without Cirencester, how long will it take to clear the current backlog? Will these lead to cases not being sent to courts, which otherwise would because of a lack of capacity? And before Martin comes in, I just having read through those again, I think you've already answered those questions, haven't you, with the responses that you gave to Councillor Burford. So maybe if Johnny could just nod at me if he's okay, that his questions have been asked and answered. I can't actually see him, so I think we'll just take that as read.
Basically, the offer was made in late April, and they will not fix the backlog until they get some additional capacity. If they got something better, good for them. But it is coming to a head, and the reason I thought it set a deadline is because what I haven't said, I don't think, at this meeting, and maybe I have, is that court was going to be converted into the future Cirencester police station. That was the intention. So we need to get on with that. We're going to do it. It's starting to cost us money. It's not just to redundant the building.
Okay, Andrea, I'll come back to you. You're on mute, Andrea.
Sorry, I thought I'd unmuted myself. So another question from Councillor Brownstein. The Ministry of Justice announced £48 million for court refurbishment. Has there been any conversation with the legal system in the county to negotiate what we need, and how much of that money will be apportioned to Gloucestershire? Now, again, that's, you know, this is following up on a discussion that was had at panel a couple of meetings ago, and obviously that information was included in the letter from our Cheltenham MP, who's also a minister at the Ministry of Justice, Alex Chalk. So we are venturing very much into territory that is outside the panel's remit, but I think that we could quite easily follow up on that letter in a kind of, we know it's not within our remit, but we would be interested to know how things are going, if you would like me to write a letter along those lines.
You know, I don't know the answer to those questions. I know what was announced, but as I say, you know, I'm the Police and Crime Commissioner. I don't have any inside knowledge into the court system at all. So I don't know. People who work at the court, and they may know. We could ask them. I don't know. Maybe the chair of the bench might know. I don't know. But even so, we need more capacity.
I've got a few people that have indicated. I've got Lorraine, and then William. Did you want to say something?
No.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Martin, what did you say? You were the chairman of the Criminal Justice Board?
Yeah, the local Criminal Justice Board. This is a non-stop.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I want to know about. criminal justice board, and you mentioned sentencing and such like. So I mentioned this thing before, and I'll continue to mention it until everybody gets fed up of it. But nevertheless, when somebody goes to court and they are convicted, they're not only they're convicted. The sentence has been passed. Sorry, they are convicted. They are guilty. Why 2 years later they're still walking around my streets awaiting sentence, doing business? Thank you.
I think that will have to be taken up separately.
Again, it's completely outside my remit. It's a perfectly reasonable question, but you need to ask that to the Probation Service, the Ministry of Justice, the Prison Service, or the Parole Board. It's completely outside my remit and knowledge, and I wouldn't want to stray into it.
Thank you. William? You need to unmute, William.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you very much. I just feel that we as a police and crime panel should be putting all our efforts behind supporting the Commissioner in his request to improve the criminal justice system in this county. And everything we can do to help him, we should be doing. Thank you.
I tend to agree, and I think it does, in a sense, the effect of not having justice that is timely is really important to the levels of crime both in this county and elsewhere.
Absolutely.
And the tardiness of actually getting to grips with this. I mean, one of the issues is the magistrates' courts find it very difficult to be COVID secure, and that's why the number of cases is drastically reduced. So you need more space. That's basically what it comes down to, albeit that prisoners, it's all being done by video, and the solicitors are in their offices. The magistrates still have to sit in court. And years ago, there were courts which used civic buildings like village halls or whatever. So it's not beyond wit. It's been done before. There is a good court in Cirencester and other places. So I absolutely agree with you, William. We should really push this because, frankly, guilty people are getting off if justice delayed, because that's justice denied. And you've got victims of domestic violence having to wait potentially years for this to come to court. It's simply not good enough, and it needs to be resolved.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Shell, but I do feel I have to remind the panel that this area is outside of its remit, the same because it is not within the remit of the Police and Crime Commissioner. But as I said earlier, I think, it is possible for me to write a letter that will, to follow up on the letter received from Alex Chalk MP, to see what is happening. And I would be able to find a way of phrasing things such that, your concerns around the criminal justice system and the delays in it at the moment, because I will write a creative letter on your behalf, if that is okay. But I think, as the person who works with the panel, it is my duty to remind you that you have strayed very much outside of your remit.
Thank you for the reminder. I've got William wanting to come back. Just a minute, Martin.
May I come back, Chair? I totally agree with what Andrea has just said, and we should be supporting Martin Searle on this matter urgently. Thank you.
I think the reason why it's so important is because what the system does, it segments up the whole process. The public don't do that. They see the fact that they've been victim of a crime, they see the police investigation, and then they see the work of the CPS and the courts. They just see it as one situation that they're going through. And very often people begin to lose confidence in policing, which is my remit, because the entire system lets them down at one particular point. The only people who go through the whole system is the victim and probably the offender on a good day. we just take bits of it as we go. So there is no doubt that if these cases don't get to court, particularly ones by serious organised criminals who will take advantage of the situation, who plead not guilty to play the system, you will lose confidence in policing per se. And that's where I do have a responsibility, and so does the panel, in my view. Sorry.
So Andrew, yeah, if you can put together a letter and then we can get that sent off, that would be really helpful. You've heard the sorts of things we've been talking about.
Yes, I will do that. And actually, the comments that Martin has just made are very helpful and will find their way in as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Going to draw a close under that one, if that's all right. I don't really see anyone madly shaking, waving their hand. And so the opening of the Sabrina Centre, Martin?
Please, my meeting. I was going to pass over to Chris to deal with that one, apart from to say we are massively proud of it. We're very delighted to see a whole range of people who came to launch of the policing crime plan, which coincided with the visit of Kit Malthouse, who was also exceedingly complimentary about it. But Chris, were you going to take this one, I think, weren't you?
I kind of did it in a double one when I started about the launch of the policing crime plan, but I'm happy to take any questions on it. I just think the link I've sent round to Andrew, we were hoping to play a bit of a video, which I know Councillor Norman and Councillor Hayward have seen at the launch, but to give you a sense of the building, we'll send you the link for that, but also the interview with Kit Malthouse that was done, I think, on the back. I think makes us quite proud, actually. I think you should be quite proud of Gloucestershire on this one. Because we now have our own dedicated training centre, as Martin will say, we never had one previously. So actually, we're doing really, really well. And I urge you to have a look at the link that Andrew hopefully will send around after the meeting, but we'll take questions.
Yeah, and Colin, we'd like to see you there as well, Colin, of course. I forgot to mention that. We are incredibly proud of it. It is world class, and I say that without fear of being proved wrong.
And I think Rich Bradley wants a quick comment as well.
No, it's okay.
Okay, I'll take Richard, and then Lorraine is indicating.
So, Martin, Chair, I was just asking if I could do my item next because I've got to call it at 12:30. But if this is a quick item, it's fine.
I think it will be. Lorraine?
Yes, it's a very quick one. I just wanted to say that a young lady that I've known for most of her life, since she was a very small child, is now a police officer. And she has obviously been to the centre and told me how fantastic it is. There you go.
Okay, thank you very much. So the link will be sent. I can back up Dave Norman in saying that it was it was really interesting to go around there, and I hope that everyone will get the chance at some point. I was told that the public can have access as well. So Martin was floating the idea of maybe a panel meeting when we meet together. That is being there. I know you're shaking your head, Andrea, but there would be the opportunity for the public to be there, and it could be broadcast, depending on what their. It hasn't been very successful today, I have to say. But
just to be clear, Chair, sorry to interrupt. My shaking the head is only because I'm quite happy to travel the world, for panel meetings. Obviously, is that legislation requires that the meeting is in the public domain. So that would be my only concern. And with the current restrictions, when we get to the other side of this, if public are allowed in, then that's another conversation to be had at that time. But I had actually had the idea of the budget. I haven't floated this with Ruth yet. I had the idea that, depending on where we are with COVID in the new year, that perhaps the budget briefing that you normally have, perhaps that could be done there.
Okay, but I do think everyone needs to have a look at it. I think there's a couple of things I just want to add. One, it's a great centre. It's a relaxing place, and it makes our police officers feel proud of what Gloucestershire is providing for them. It gives them a place to relax. It's very stressful, their job. So I think it was an excellent idea, and just having something that is state of the art, I think really helps. And so it's all good, but you'll see it for yourselves at some point. I think that's really it, unless someone who's got something apart from anecdotes that they want to say. No, Richard, do you want to go on to your report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me. I take it you've all read the report. I just want to pick out a few points. Councillor Brownstone asked for some comparative data, which we put in at the start of the report. Holding to account, that's quite a long process. That's where we're holding the Chief Constable to account to ensure that all the many contracts that the constabulary have are managed effectively, and I'll be able to report back on that further at the next meeting. The Commissioner's Fund, Martin's already alluded to the fact that I'm working very closely with the voluntary community sector. I now sit on 4 different funding panels within the county. High Sheriff's Commissioning Fund, Gloucestershire Funders, and I'm now part of the Gloucestershire Community Foundation. We put some the advert out recently for people to bid against the Commissioner's Fund. We've got a close date of the 16th of November, but what we're seeing is very, very few people bidding. And I'm seeing that in the other funding partnerships that I sit on. And I think that is an indication that people actually don't know what their future will be due to COVID. So we're hoping we'll get some bids in, but it's something we're witnessing across the county, and it's quite a sad state of affairs. And also what we don't want to see is some of our great voluntary and community projects collapsing. So we're very much on the ball there. Estate, there are some images attached to my report of the proposed new building for Bam Furlong. And the plan for that is that we aim to be on site in January, subject to the final business case and the Commissioner agreeing to the finance of that. We hope to be on site in January 2021, so that's not very far away. And the final point I'd like to make is under the staff update, we've just been joined by a new intern who started with us recently. This is an annual programme we offer to graduates from local universities. There is a slight typo in the second paragraph when we refer to one of our precious interns who's now studying for a PhD. It should read previous, but she actually is precious. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Can't see anyone. So, Richard, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
It's very informative, which may be why there's no questions. I don't know.
Okay, thanks.
Aaron, are you wanting to say something? No? Okay. Yeah, so thank you, Richard, for that. I think that draws the end of the meeting, unless someone tells me otherwise. So thank you all very much for attending, and apologies for the delayed start. I think people did try to get things sorted, but it best laid plans, etc. So anyway, stay safe, and I'll at least see you, if not meet you, at the next meeting. So thank you all very much.
Okay.
Bye.
So Simon, if you could end the YouTube feed, please.
I'm doing that now.
Thank you.
I'll tell you when it's ended.